Welcome to MojoPlays, and there's no way we're waiting for Resident Evil 9. Also, I'm quite sick. Today, we're looking at the 10 games to play if you love Resident Evil. Whether it's the OG style of Resident Evil 1 through 3, the shoot-'em-up third-person of Resident Evil 4 to 6, or the current first-person horror experiences of Resident Evil 7 and 8, we've got a range of choice for you to check out.
Before we continue, we publish content all week long, so be sure to subscribe and ring the bell to get notified of our latest videos.
Deep Fear. Resident Evil 1 through 3 were praised for their gameplay style and horror-focused action. The fixed camera perspective made jump scares easy to produce, and tension as tense as tension can intensify. Tensely. The Sega Saturn often doesn't receive the recognition it deserves as a gaming console, yet it managed to deliver a handful of remarkable titles that remain somewhat overlooked. Among these is Sega's Deep Fear, which made its debut alongside Resident Evil 2 in the same year. Drawing parallels with Resident Evil 2, Deep Fear presents a unique experience set in the confines of a submarine. With its intriguing monster designs blending elements of horror and science fiction, the game distinguishes itself and holds up well compared to its peers of the 90s. For enthusiasts of the survival horror genre in general, Deep Fear is definitely worth a sneaky peeky. Signalis. Want a taste of something newer that still holds the classic Resi Evil feel? Signalis embodies the essence of a sci-fi horror adventure akin to Resident Evil, where every character, including the protagonist, is an android. The narrative deliberately maintains a level of vagueness and symbolism, adding to the eerie atmosphere with monsters that instill fear despite often lurking in the shadows. Yet perhaps the most chilling feature of Signalis is its incredibly constrictive inventory system. As long as you've trained extensively in the fine art of inventory management thanks to Resident Evil, you should be fine. Dispatching enemies requires scarce special ammunition, leaving players in a constant state of uncertainty regarding their resources and inventory space for essential items. Dino Crisis series.
What is this?
There are a few games on our list that were made after the popularity of the original Resident Evil game hit players. Emulating this survival horror fixed cam gameplay proved to be a winning formula, and Dino Crisis is no exception. Referred to by some as the better Resident Evil, Dino Crisis marketed itself as a panic horror rather than the survival horror branding that came with Resident Evil. Playing, feeling, and looking a lot like Resident Evil, this game features more consistent jump scares and a far more intelligent enemy AI. Each game is truly terrifying, and the series evolves much like Resident Evil eventually did, with Dino Crisis 3 being much more similar to Resident Evil 5 and 6. Onimusha Warlords.
Nobunaga has finally accused the enemy.
Continuing on this trend of style, Onimusha Warlords embraces the classic Resident Evil formula with its familiar tank controls and key collection mechanics. However, rather than prioritizing resource management, the game shifts its focus towards swordplay and weapon upgrading, enabling players to unlock new attacks and progress through various paths. While this action-oriented approach may diminish the scares typically associated with Resident Evil, Onimusha Warlords still offers an enjoyable experience rich in mythological horror themes. Dead Space. Completely by accident, we're moving on from the original Resident Evil style to a game that is far more comparable to the style of Resident Evil 4 through 6, and that's Dead Space. This game revolutionized over-the-shoulder perspective by minimizing the HUD to clean up the screen, and that choice paved the way for many games to come. Influence begets influence, begets influence, begets influence. begets influence. Dead Space can be likened to a space-themed version of Resident Evil, featuring its own eerie take on zombies that shows us that as long as we're willing to play along, game devs are willing to get creative. Or just remake the games that were creative. Either way, good fun. Alan Wake.
In a horror story, the victim keeps asking why, but there can be no explanation, and there shouldn't be one. The unanswered mystery is what stays with us the longest.
With the recent remaster, if you're a fan of pretty much any Resident Evil game, you're gonna have a blast with Alan Wake. And luckily, Alan Wake Remastered doesn't introduce significant alterations to the original game, apart from a commendable graphical enhancement. Fans of the series should also explore Alan Wake's American Nightmare and Alan Wake 2, with the latter often considered the pinnacle of the franchise. But start at the beginning and see how you feel. It feels like a combination of a lot of different Resident Evil themes and styles, but stands out on this list as the most original title. It's borderline splitting hairs that we're including it, but any chance I get to recommend Alan Wake is a chance I have to grab. The Evil Within series.
Damn it! Lily, I'm here!
Here's an absolute winner if you're a fan of Resident Evil 4. Coming from one of the creators of Resident Evil, The Evil Within from Tango Gameworks quickly captured interest as a potential torchbearer for the survival horror genre, particularly during a time of uncertainty for Capcom's franchise. While it may not entirely meet all expectations, the third-person shooter delivers genuinely spine-chilling moments in a manner few horror games can achieve. What separates it from Resident Evil 4 is that it is far more scary. It does offer a good amount of action, but gives some of that up in favor of tense horror, similar to Resident Evil 7. It's got a bit of everything, except Sonic the Hedgehog. It has zero Sonic the Hedgehog. Alien Isolation.
Axel? What have I got on me?
Often considered one of the most underrepresented and underappreciated survival horror games ever made, Alien Isolation takes the tension of a survival first-person horror and throws a f***ing xenomorph into the mix. Playing and feeling unbelievably similar to Resident Evil 7, Alien Isolation focuses on avoiding the enemy rather than facing it. Making your way through the Sevastopol space station, the game is filled with loads of Easter eggs and references to the original Alien film, making it not only a brilliant experience for horror game fans, but horror film fans as well. If you haven't played this one yet, I would stake my very, very shaky reputation on it by saying it's in the top 10 best horror games of all time.
We're experiencing fire. Really shouldn't be here. You're becoming hysterical.
Parasite Eve. You thought we were done with classic Resident Evil, didn't you? Thought we'd moved on? Well, our two final entries are focused entirely on classic survival horror, so strap in because it's going to get spooky. Even though Resident Evil does this wonderfully as well, the narrative of Parasite Eve is skillfully paced and populated with a cast of unforgettable characters, making it a compelling experience in its own right. The combat mechanics blend RPG and survival horror elements, though it may feel a bit cumbersome at times, while the upgrade system introduces a layer of strategic depth to encounters. Both Parasite Eve and its sequel stand out as exceptional titles, and we won't mention any others. Shut up. Silent Hill 1 through 3.
Mary, could you really be in this town?
How could we do a list on games like Resident Evil without discussing the elephant in the room? I mean, Silent Hill really kind of feels like Resident Evil if your character was way worse with guns. Silent Hill games catered to those seeking an immersive experience where they weren't necessarily in control of the action, but rather felt genuinely trapped in a world filled with horror. As Resident Evil shifted more towards action-oriented gameplay, fans found solace in the Silent Hill series for keeping the torch of horror gaming burning bright. Although subsequent entries have their merits, the consensus remains that the first three Silent Hill games stand out as pinnacles of the series. Where Resident Evil has Resident Evil 6, Silent Hill has like 45 games that are not worth your time.
Did you enjoy this video? Check out these other clips from MojoPlays and be sure to subscribe and ring the bell to be notified of our latest videos.